You are not just another hustling salesperson. You are the expert, the resource, the valuable partner for your clients. And how you grow your business should reflect how your clients see you. Welcome to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. We generate referrals without asking, build positive client experiences, and help you take control of your business. Here's your charmingly sarcastic host, Stacey Brown Randall.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 159 of the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Brown Randall. Well, we are knee deep in our client experience series. And guess what? We're getting pretty close to wrapping it up. That's right, just a few more episodes as we round out all the things that you need to know about having the best, the stickiest, the most wonderful client experience. And today's episode, we are diving in to the second stage of the 3 stages of the client experience. That's right. We are diving in today to the active stage. Now, if you are a first-time listener and you're like, what is she talking about? We're in stage 2 of 3 stages, and what's this client experience thing? Well, I'm going to invite you to just pause right now and go all the way back to episode 151, which is where we kick off this client experience series. And if you're like, hey, no, I've been following along for the most part, but I'm just slightly confused on these 3 stages, well, then just head on back to episode 156. 156 gives you the overview, kind of the breakdown of the 3 stages of our client experience. And since episode 156, starting with episode 157, we've been breaking down these 3 stages. So episode 157 was how we nail the new client stage, and then we did a student spotlight on it with episode 158 about how a business owner put things into practice to nail their new client stage. And now, of course, we're moving on to mastering the active stage, which is stage 2. So those 3 stages, quick overview are, there's the new client stage, when someone says yes to working with you, up until the point that you determine they're no longer new, and they've moved into the active stage. So you have the new client stage moving into the active stage, and then if the work that you do has an end point, like you're a real estate agent or an architect, or maybe you're a business coach, and the work that you do, there is an end point, then, of course, they move into the 3rd stage after that endpoint of the work you're doing, and that moves them to the alumni stage. Now, many of you, I just gave a couple of examples, many of you actually move from the active stage into the alumni stage. But there are some of you, like financial advisors, CPAs, attorneys that work on retainer, where truly your active stage, it never ends because you don't ever want the client to go away. You want them to keep working with you. So it does look a little bit different depending on what type of business you're in, and we really dove into that in episode 156, the 3 stages of the client experience. So you can figure out how many stages you have, which kind of tells you which of these episodes you want to be paying attention to based on what you need to be implementing in your business. So this episode is all about the active stage. It is the stage that comes after the new stage. Now, I mentioned that everybody has the new client stage. When a client says yes to working with you, they are new for however long you dictate they are new, whether that is 3 days, 30 days, 3 months, or a year. Whatever you determine is your new client stage, you determine that length. I do not set that for you. Nobody sets that for you. You set that for yourself. And in most cases, I bet even your industry doesn't set that for you because they probably don't talk about this stuff all that much in terms of the new client stage, but you get to determine based on your business, based on how you work with your clients, when the new stage is done. And when the new client stage is done, they're no longer a newbie, so to speak. They move into the active stage. And what's really important for people to understand with this active stage is that it's either ongoing with no endpoint, or there is actually an end date. And so we're going to dig into that in just a minute and kind of dig into understanding, okay, what does it look like? Am I ongoing, or do I have an end date with it? And then we're going to talk about the kind of tension that happens in the active stage between the work and the relationship-based touch points. But first, I just want to remind you why this active stage is so very important. We talked about the why of the new client stage, like why we need to get it right, why we need to make sure that we are nailing it. And number one, it's to help overcome buyer's remorse when a a new client has said yes to working with us. If they have any buyer's remorse, that new client stage helps overcome that and helps dissipate that and makes any buyer's remorse kind of go away. And of course, it is a great opportunity to start priming our clients for referrals, because they're going to be so wowed by how well you take care of them in that new client stage, right? That is putting them in a position to be more likely to refer you. Well, of course, the active client stage continues on that. So typically by the time your client has moved into the active client stage, I'm going to make a guess and say that they have overcome their buyer's remorse, because if not, they probably would have stopped working with you during that new client stage. If they made the decision that this wasn't the right decision for them, usually people are going to back out when they're in that new client stage. There's a lot of research out there that says businesses are more likely to lose a majority of their clients, or are more likely to lose somebody in the first 100 days versus any other time period in the working together. So just keep that in mind. That's why that new client stage matters so very much. But with our active client stage, we actually need it to continue our stickiness. Now, I've been talking about this concept of stickiness, and for some of you, it's a positive thing, and for some of you, it's a very negative thing, right? Like, I'm just thinking about my daughter's friend who was over at her house over the weekend and got gum in her hair, and it was a very sticky situation, and it wasn't a very positive one, right? But I want you to think of stickiness as a positive thing. Like, it allows your clients to stick around. It makes them sticky to you in terms of, in a positive way, like they want to be connected to you. And so if we continue this idea within our active client stage of taking care of them in the right way, we get to continue the stickiness, which means they are more likely to be a repeat client if the setup of how our business works allows for clients to come back to us. And of course, it allows us to continue to receive referrals from our clients. Now, just because I say the new client stage and the active client stage allows you to continue to receive referrals from your clients, it doesn't mean they're obligated to give them to you. No one is ever obligated to give you a referral. But it definitely means you're doing the right things so that somebody else is willing, a client is willing to talk about you. They are willing to share with someone else what you've done for them and what it was like working for you. And I mentioned this before, we're not talking about perfection. What we're talking about is your ability to take care of a client and the way you would want to be taken care of. And when something doesn't go right, you also are there to fix it. The majority of my business nowadays, it didn't used to be this way, but nowadays it has been for the last, I don't know. I feel like I'm just getting older every time I say this, but many, many years, even though it wasn't always like this, for many, many years, my business runs off of tech. When you join any of my programs, they are delivered to you through technology. Even if you decide to go a VIP level and work with me one-on-one throughout an entire year in the Growth by Referrals program, and you get like the online program, which is all delivered by our technology platform, right? Like our learning management software. Even though you get that from like that tech-based platform, but we also have one-on-one sessions together, that's still delivered by the technology because it's delivered through Zoom. So we can see each other's smiling, shiny faces, right? And so I don't control a lot of the technology deciding to work or not work. And so I know that as the best I try to do to create this incredible client experience for my clients, for my students that go through my programs, there are bound to be times when things aren't going to work. It's the same for you. Our mantra here with my company is we just fix it and we make it right. And we're so thankful when someone points something out to us. We don't get upset or mad. We're like, oh my gosh, thank you, because it may have taken us days or weeks to realize it when the users, the clients, right, who are using the technology, going through my programs, can tell me instantly something isn't working. It reminds me that we had a couple of issues a while back with the Sticky Client Experience program, like what this whole series is based on, what my next book is based on that I'm working on right now. It's actually a couple of the videos just wouldn't play, and it took us weeks to troubleshoot it. And we eventually got to the place where we got it working. It's not very pretty, but we got it working so that the content could be delivered. But then we were like, okay, now we just need to make this better. And it's perfect timing because we're going to overhaul and re-record and refilm the Sticky Client Experience program because of this series and because of the book coming out. But like we had to get in there and fix it. So when I say I'm not looking for perfection, I expect things not to go according to plan. But I also expect that you will know how you will solve them. So again, this whole idea of stickiness, it's allowing your clients to come back to you to work with you again because you have this great client experience that you've mapped out with your work and your relationship-based touch points. In addition to you're managing expectations, they understand what to expect, and you have a process in place to how to fix things when things don't go according to plan. That's all wrapped up into our client experience. Okay. This is why the active stage matters so much. Again, it's because it allows us to keep with the stickiness with our clients so that they will become repeat clients. And of course, they will hopefully be willing to give us referrals. But what we need to understand is that the active stage is a little bit different than the new stage in terms of, for some of you, it's a longer stage. Now, I believe the alumni stage, if you have that stage, that final stage of the client experience, is actually the longest stage because someone can be an alumni for years because they're done working with you and maybe they haven't come back to be a repeat client, but they're in this alumni stage now, right? So I believe that for some of you, the alumni stage is your longest stage, but the active client stage is typically longer than the new client stage. The active client stage starts the minute you determine they are done with being new and now they've moved to active. And you have two paths to look at this. Either it is ongoing, where they're going to be in the active stage forever until they are no longer working with you, and that could be years and years from now because that's how your business is set up. Think about a CPA who prepares your taxes every year, a financial advisor who manages your money and your risk every year, and you do those annual meetings with, right? So, or maybe more. From that perspective, there's some of you have ongoing and it never ends, and you'll never have alumni. But for many of you, you're actually going to have an end date, which means the active stage will come to a close. And typically when it ends is when the work is done. It is that final delivery of whatever that final work touch point or relationship touch point is. And that determines when the active stage ends. And then, of course, they move into alumni stage. Now, alumni stage, I'll talk more about this coming up, but alumni stage is more about they are no longer a client in terms of being active. And they are more like what you may refer to as a previous client. I just don't call them previous clients, I call them alumni. And I'll explain all that when we get to that episode. And that's coming up in a couple of episodes. But when you think about what this looks like, you know when it starts. When the new client stage ends, they move into the active stage. You determine when your active stage ends. Is it an end date because that's when the work will be done? Or is it ongoing because you want to prepare their taxes or manage their money every single year? So let me give you some examples of end dates. End dates would be like, let's look at it from the perspective of a real estate agent. When the house is sold, the keys have been handed over, maybe that is when the end date is. Maybe yours is a little bit after that, like when the client moves in, then you consider that to be the end date of the work that you do. But it typically is defined by when the work that you do is done. Let's look about this from like a mortgage broker's perspective. This would be when the funds have been delivered and they're sitting at the closing table and everything's been signed off and they've signed those million pieces of paper and signed their life away, right? And then they officially have their loan, they have their house, and it's done. Let's think about coaches and consultants. Your end date could be when your last coaching session happens as a consultant. Maybe it is when you wrap up the project work and deliver your final deliverables to your client. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking at here. As an interior designer, it could be once the install is done, the punch list has been completed, and you've wrapped up the project and you're completed and you've taken your photographs of it. So you have your after pictures in addition to your before pictures, and you're done. For a home stager, for you, it could actually be not only once the home is staged, but then once the home is sold and you take all of your furniture and furnishings out of the home. So all of you have to think through your own end date if you have an end date kind of scenario. So again, you're either ongoing and the active stage is where you stay. It's your last and final stage because it never ends. Or your active stage has an end date, and then you get to determine based on when they move from new to active, and when active ends, that is the length of your active client stage. Now, I find the easiest way to visualize your active client stage, once you have your new client stage built, I find that the easiest way to visualize the active stage is to really actually start by mapping out your work touch points. Like, what are the things you have to do to deliver on the work you're going to do? It's the same way I encouraged you guys to think about mapping out your new client stage. Map out your work touch points, and then go back and consider what are the relationship touch points you're already doing. So remember, our client experience is made up of work work-based touch points and relationship-based touch points. But start by mapping out your work touch points and seeing, wow, okay, this is for 6 months, this is for 3 months, this is for 9 months, this is indefinite until we get to a closing date, right? Or we get to an end date, because every buyer's transaction looks different. So it's important for you that you have mapped out your work touch points and you understand exactly what those look like as you go step by step by step by step. That is the best way to consider what your active stage will look like, is starting with what we already know and what we should already be doing, which of course are our work touch points. And then start to consider the relationship touch points you already have. Like, so if you do a holiday card every year for all your clients, and maybe you do it for your alumni clients too, right? That is that is a continuing relationship touch point that you do. That's probably in the active stage, and I'm going to guess in the alumni stage too. But consider the relationship-based touch points you already do. Here's a pro tip of how to think about your active stage. When you're thinking about your active stage touch points, the ones that are in particular, the ones that are relationship based. So the ones that are driven based on relationship, they're probably going to happen in one or two ways. They're going to happen by the calendar, or they're going to happen more than likely when you're prepping for a work touch point. So let me explain what I mean. When I say that your relationship-based touch points in the active stage are going to happen by calendar, it's because typically they're going to be something that is calendar-based. It's the anniversary date of when your client started working with you. It is the point in which they have found the house and they've made an offer and the offer has been accepted, right? There are calendar-based touch points that kind of happen from that perspective. So when we think about this from a date perspective first, from a calendar. So it's the anniversary of when they've been working with you. It is the holiday card that you send out at the end of every year, or the Happy New Year card that you send out every year. So a lot of our relationship-based touch points in the active stage is actually driven by the 12 months of the year, which means that when we map out our work-based touch points, where we're infusing in our relationship-based touch points is more about the calendar and not the work that we're doing. So the next thing, of course, would be the ones where we are prepping for a work touch point. So if we look at, again, let me just kind of back up and say this. As we look at our relationship-based touch points, a lot of times they're going to be on your list because they're calendar-based. And the other option is because you're prepping for a work touch point. So again, calendar-based are like sending out a holiday card or a Thanksgiving pie, right? You do that for your clients. The clients that are with you at that time of year, they're getting that touch point because that happens as part of the client stage. The other ones are ones that happen when you are prepping for a work-based touch point, like the annual review or the quarterly review that you may do for your clients. Maybe there's something you do relationship side to go along with that work-based touch point. So I know a financial advisor who used to send out cookies in advance of the annual review for her clients. And it was like, here's just a little something to hold you over, right, for when we do our annual review. And then I think one year she actually used language that was more around like, hey, I know annual reviews of your financial plan are probably not the most thrilling thing you do all year, but let's enjoy it while we are doing it. Enjoy these cookies when we are doing your annual review. So the idea was the annual cookies were sent out to be enjoyed during that annual review together. So thinking about it from that perspective, right, you've got to think through your work touch points, and then you have to think through your relationship touch points that go along either by calendar, and they happen regardless of where a client is in a stage, or they are relationship-based touch points that go along before or after, because either you're prepping for a work touch point coming up, or there's something that you're doing after a work touch point has happened. Now, of course, are there some that don't fall into either of those two categories? Yes, but I find when you think about them in this way, it is easy for you to really wrap your mind around them and categorize them and kind of get your arms around them to understand it. So again, that's just a pro tip for how you can think about your how you can think about your relationship-based touch points when you're mapping out the work-based touch points that you already have within your active client stage. Because if you're just listening to me talk about this every week and you're thinking in your head about different things, and then things are either starting to like not come together or kind of come together, but nothing's actually executing and happening, it's because I really need you to stop and put this stuff on paper. That's the only way this stuff works. When people go through the Sticky Client Experience program, there's a workbook that like helps them walk through everything that they're learning and figure out what their client experience will ultimately end up looking like, and then how they will process it. So, make it a process. We call it processitizing in the business, make it systematic so that they actually can execute on it in a repeatable way. So that's just something for you to keep in mind, is sometimes you just need to sit down with a blank sheet of paper and start mapping this stuff out. Actually, it's a big change I made to the book after I started writing it. As you guys know, the second book that I'm working on is the client experience book. And I made a big change to it as I started working on it. I was like, I want this to be more like do it with me as I'm teaching it to you, with like pages in the book where you're actually doing the exercise or the activity I'm encouraging you to do, and creating space in the book for you to do that. So when you think about doing this process, whether you're just going to listen to the series and the episode, right, and maybe not buy the book next year when it's available, or go through the Sticky Client Experience program, you still need to put this stuff into writing so that you can actually come up with, visualize it and see it, and then know how to actually put it into practice. All right. Okay. So you guys know where to find the resources and the things that I have mentioned in this episode. It is always on the show notes page for every episode. The show notes page for this episode is stacybrownrandall.com/159. And you know it, Stacy with an E. Okay. So just remember, before I sign off, don't worry, there's still a lot of referral stuff happening in our world, even though we're talking about the client experience right now, and we have been for most of the summer. I just want you to know, and we will continue through July for more of talking about this kind of information on the client experience. There's still a lot of fun referral stuff happening inside our Referrals Without Asking Facebook group, so I hope you will come join us there. We're talking about referrals in there when people have questions. We also dissect these episodes as well every week for those that have questions or thoughts or comments. So you can jump in there to the Referrals Without Asking Facebook group. Of course, if you haven't taken the Referral Ninja quiz, you should really know your Referral Ninja level. It shows and tells you what your gaps are and where you should start and where you need to go based on those gaps you need to close to get to the Referral Ninja Master level. And then, of course, we have some free training, some webinars that are on demand, that are pre-recorded, that you can watch when it suits you. Just go to stacybrownrandall.com/training. That's stacybrownrandall.com/training. And that way you can sign up, or not even sign up, you can just click on the link and immediately a page will pop up with an on-demand webinar. We've got 2 right now that are available that you can go check out that are referral based. And then, of course, when the summer ends, as we're wrapping up the summer, we will kick off another live referral challenge. So for those of you who are like, yeah, I'm loving this client experience stuff, but when do we get back to talking about referrals? Don't worry, my friends, it is coming. All right, coming up next week is episode 160, and it is our client experience question and answer. And we've had some really great questions submitted. Thank you to you guys who have done that. I'm looking forward to you guys hearing my answers to those questions next week, episode 160 on our client experience Q&A. Until then, take control and grow your business. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. To access all resources and links mentioned in today's show, and to connect with Stacy, head over to www.stacybrownrandall.com.